It was October 2022. I was working as a medical equipment delivery driver in Pennsylvania. It was getting close to 1 a.m. by the time I finished my last drop-off in Scranton. Instead of hitting I-81, I decided to take a shortcut through the backwoods towards Wilkes-Barre. The fog was unreal. I could barely see 5 feet in front of my truck. About 20 minutes into the drive, in total silence, I saw something on the shoulder of the road. It was an old SUV. The windshield was completely smashed, and it was parked at this weird angle, like it had swerved off suddenly. There were no lights on. None. My gut told me to keep driving, but for some reason, I pulled over. I left the engine idling and stepped out. The air was so cold it hit me like a wall. I called out, "Is anyone there? Do you need help?" Silence. I walked closer, using my phone's flashlight. The seats were empty, but then I saw it. The back door was cracked open, and inside were dozens of old shoes. Kids' shoes, heels, heavy work boots, all of them caked in fresh, wet mud. Suddenly, I heard a branch snap in the woods right behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing but trees and fog. Then, I heard a sound I'll never forget. A faint whisper, like someone reading a list of names really fast. Mike, Sarah, John, David. My blood went cold. I bolted back to my truck, but when I grabbed the handle, the door was locked. The door I'd left wide open was now shut tight. And the engine, it just cut out. Through the tinted glass, I saw a hand. A pale, unnaturally long-fingered hand, slowly placing my keys on the dashboard.
I froze. My breath was coming out in thick clouds, and my heart was hammering so loud I could hear it in my ears. The person inside my truck didn't even look at me. They just sat there in the driver's seat, their head tilted at this sickening angle toward the right. I started banging on the glass, screaming, "Get out of my car! I'm calling the cops!" He didn't move. I reached for my phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. But then it hit me. There was zero signal this deep in the woods. Suddenly, the lights of the wrecked SUV behind me started flickering. On, off, on, off. And every time the lights flashed, I saw a reflection in the truck's side mirror. A man in a filthy leather mask standing right behind me. I scrambled away from the truck and just started running into the dark. I could hear heavy footsteps behind me, but they weren't normal. It sounded like he was leaping. I tripped and fell into a muddy ditch by the road, crawling behind a massive oak tree to hide. I covered my mouth with my hands, trying to stay silent. I watched the man walk past. He was huge, wearing these old, tattered miner's overalls. He wasn't carrying a weapon. He was holding an old-school tape recorder. He stopped just a few feet away and pressed play. A voice came out. It was my voice. "Is anyone there? Do you need help?" The recorder looped my own words over and over, distorted and slowed down. Then, silence. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message. In that dead silence, it sounded like a gunshot. The man's head snapped toward my tree, slowly. I saw his eyes through the mask. There were no eyes, just empty black pits, and the smell of rot was overwhelming.
I backed away, trying not to make a sound, but the ground was covered in dry leaves. The man started laughing. It wasn't a human laugh. It sounded like metal scraping against metal. I got up and ran. I didn't look back. After what felt like miles, I saw a light.
It was a rundown place called the Pines Motel. I burst into the lobby, gasping for air. There was an old man behind the desk, staring at a static-filled TV. I yelled, "Call the police! Someone's chasing me!" The old man just looked at me with these cold, dead eyes. He didn't move an inch. He just said, "You're delivery driver number 4 this week." I didn't get it. "What are you talking about? Where's the phone?" He pointed to a hallway. "Phone's back there, but the lines are down because of the fog. You can wait in room 12 until morning." I was too terrified to think straight. I went to the room and locked every bolt I could find. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching a small pocket knife. An hour passed. Then, I heard a scratching sound coming from under the bed. Then, a tape recorder clicked on. "You're delivery driver number 4 this week." It was the old man's voice coming from right under me. I was paralyzed. That's when I noticed a pile of clothes in the corner of the room. I walked over, and they were my work clothes. My name, Mark, was right there on the patch. But I was wearing my clothes, right? I looked in the mirror above the dresser, and I didn't see a reflection. The room in the mirror was completely empty. Suddenly, a cold hand gripped my ankle from under the bed and pulled with incredible force. I screamed as I hit the floor, and just before I was pulled into the dark, my phone lit up with a new text from an unknown number. It said, "Thanks for the new shoes, Mark." To this day, they never found my truck. The cops told me that the Pines Motel actually burned to the ground in 1994. There's nothing left there but concrete foundations in the middle of the woods. I'm writing this from my room now, but I can hear a tape recorder playing in the hallway outside my door. It's the sound of my own screams from that night. And my shoes. They've started disappearing from my closet, one by one.
None of you can possibly feel the pain I'm going through as I write this. It was over a year ago, a Tuesday night, just past 1 a.m. I was driving my truck through the winding back roads of Route 15 in rural Kentucky. It's a road notorious for swallowing strangers whole. The fog there isn't just a weather phenomenon. It's a heavy, sticky shroud that wraps around the towering trees and masks the dangerous curves. Suddenly, a dual explosion rocked the chassis. The impact was violent, and I felt the steering wheel rip out of my hands. The truck veered off, slamming into the trunk of a massive oak tree. The windshield shattered, sending shards flying everywhere. I lost consciousness, temporarily, for a duration I can't quite determine. Strange, overlapping sounds began to reach my ears. The wind howling like a storm, mixed with the screams of children and adults. That's what snapped me out of it, especially as the initial shock of the crash began to fade. I stumbled out of the cab, reeling, with blood streaming down my forehead. As I inspected the road and tried to process what happened, I saw it. A crude wooden plank studded with long, industrial iron nails, painted black to vanish in the dark. I realized then that this was no natural accident. It was a trap, meticulously set. I looked around. The woods were silent with the stillness of the dead, and there wasn't a single bar of signal on my phone. I limped slowly for half a mile, dragging my leg, until I spotted a faint, flickering light in the distance. It was a dilapidated old workshop, surrounded by a barbed wire fence draped in filthy rags that fluttered in the wind like ghosts. I pushed through the iron door, which let out a screech that tore through the night's silence. The smell was the first thing to hit my senses. A suffocating mix of burnt oil, pure bleach, and the heavy, repulsive metallic tang of fresh blood that hadn't yet dried. At the back of the shop, under a single swaying bulb that emitted a constant electrical hum, I saw a massive man. His back was to me, and he was wearing a black leather apron that glistened under the light from all the fluids clinging to it. He was using a giant circular saw to cut something I couldn't quite see on a tilted metal table. The setup allowed fluids to flow toward a floor drain clogged with fleshy remains. When a long clump of human hair fell to the floor, my heart nearly stopped. I tried to back away slowly, but my foot hit a metal bucket full of rusted tools. The saw stopped abruptly. The man turned his head with terrifying slowness. His nose was huge, just too wide, pulsing slits in the middle of a mass of old burn scars. His yellow eyes were bulging, lidless. He didn't scream, and he didn't speak to me. He just revved his saw, sending red sparks flying over my clothes. I tried to climb the metal racks to reach a ventilation duct, but with a single, precise, and insane blow of the saw, the man cut through the iron support beam. The rack collapsed under me, and I fell into a pile of debris. Before I could regain my balance, I felt a white-hot flash of excruciating pain that turned my vision black. The man had driven a massive meat hook, the kind used for hanging cattle, into the muscular area between my hamstrings and the bone in my right thigh. The pain was so intense it bypassed the stage of screaming. My mind simply lost the ability to process it. He used a manual winch to hoist me up by the hook, hanging me upside down. Blood began rushing to my head, making my vision blurry and framed by a red halo of hemorrhage. The man grabbed a sharp, rusted, skinning knife. He didn't start by cutting the muscles. That would have accelerated my death and ruined the raw material. Instead, he began separating my skin from the thin tissues at the ankle, working his way up toward the knee with the skill of a sadistic surgeon obsessed with detail. Every time the shock threatened to make me pass out, he poured a mixture of salt and concentrated vinegar over the open wound. I believe it was to bring me back to the peak of consciousness. He wanted me to feel every second as I was being skinned alive. He whispered in a voice that sounded like stones grinding together, "You are number 7. 7 completes the code." What saved me was the adrenaline storm that surged through my body, a neurochemical state that numbs initial pain to allow an individual to fight for survival. As I hung there, I was certain my death was near. I thought of my wife, my child who hadn't even reached his first birthday, and my friends at work. While the man turned to fetch a metal press, I saw a gallon of paint thinner near a gas stove. I didn't know what he used it for. I swung my hanging body with everything I had, ignoring the sound of my own tendons tearing as they stretched against the metal hook. I kicked the table with my good leg. An orange fireball erupted in seconds. The flames caught the man's oil and grease-soaked apron. In the middle of the chaos and his screams, which sounded like the howling of rabid dogs, the intense heat weakened the nylon winch rope. I crashed to the floor with an impact that rattled my spine. The hook was still embedded deep in my thigh. I knew that if I tried to pull it out, I'd bleed to death in less than a minute. The hook was acting as a plug, keeping the artery from exploding. I crawled outside, using my arms to pull my dead weight across the concrete floor, while the metal hook made a bone-chilling sound as it scraped against the ground. It took me 2 full hours to crawl half a mile toward the road. Every inch was a battle against the fading of my consciousness. I used my shirt to tie a tourniquet right above the hook, tightening it until my fingers lost all sensation. A trucker found me at dawn, leaving behind a long, smeared trail of blood stretching out from the trees. I woke up 4 days later in the hospital. The police told me they found the workshop burned to ashes, and they found no bodies at the site. But the surgeon's face was pale when he spoke to me. He said in a trembling voice, "Mark, the hook wasn't the worst part. When we operated, we found surgical sutures made of human hair stitched deep inside your femoral sheath, as if someone was trying to fuse foreign tissue into your nervous system. Now, every night, I feel a strange pulse inside my leg. And yesterday, I felt the black threads starting to move under my skin on their own. They are slowly weaving a single word that I can now read clearly through the translucent scabs of the wound. Property. I'm not running from him anymore. I'm carrying him now, deep inside my flesh."
My name is Elias, and I'm a radar systems maintenance engineer. 6 months ago,
I accepted a lucrative offer to work at Sirius 9, an old research platform situated in a forgotten corner of the Arctic Ocean. I was supposed to be alone with just one security guard named Solomon. Our mission was simple: monitor the ice melt and record any unusual radio frequencies. By the third week, the equipment started picking up a sound unlike anything I've ever heard. It wasn't mechanical, it was a rhythmic thump, a steady pulse coming from 400 meters beneath the platform. It sounded like a heartbeat, but it was so massive that the metal structure of the rig vibrated slowly with every beat. I asked Solomon if he'd heard it, but he just sat in the control room, staring silently at the monitors, never turning to face me. When I finally approached him, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Solomon was wearing his headphones, but the cord had been severed. He was muttering incoherent words under his breath while drawing interlocking blue circles all over the control panel. That night, the power to the platform went out completely. Total darkness swallowed everything, except for a faint, eerie blue glow emanating from the ice beneath us. I headed down to the lower deck to fix the generator, but I found the engine room door wide open. The metal walls were coated in a viscous substance that looked like frozen mold, and the air reeked of ozone and lightning. Suddenly, I saw Solomon. He was standing in the middle of the room, but he wasn't the man I knew. His body was hunched at an impossible angle, and his skin had become so translucent that I could see his veins pulsing with a glowing blue light. He wasn't breathing air. Instead, there were small slits behind his ears moving rhythmically, like fish gills. He turned toward me, and I realized his eyes were gone, replaced by a shimmering, crystalline tissue. He spoke in a voice that wasn't his own, but rather an echo of that pulse I'd heard beneath the ice. The Earth isn't melting, Elias. The Earth is waking up.
The platform began to sway violently, as if something gargantuan was trying to breach the ice from below. I looked through the thick glass observation floor and saw a colossal eye, larger than the entire rig, opening beneath the ice sheet. It wasn't the eye of any animal we know. It was an eye composed of thousands of tiny, glowing galaxies. I realized then that we weren't sitting on an oil field. We were perched on top of an ancient entity. The ice had been its only prison, and global warming was the key to its cage. I bolted toward the only lifeboat. Solomon was crawling after me with supernatural speed, his limbs elongating and shifting into something resembling icy tentacles. I jumped into the boat and cranked the engine. As I pulled away, I watched the entire platform get crushed like a tin can under the pressure of something rising from the depths. It wasn't an alien, and it wasn't a ghost. It was nature in its rawest, most terrifying form. I reached the Norwegian coast days later, suffering from severe frostbite. The doctors told me I was hallucinating due to the extreme cold. But I know the truth. Yesterday, I went to the bathroom to wash my face. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a small vein in my neck pulsing with a faint blue light. And I've started hearing that thump coming from inside my own chest this time. We aren't the survivors. We're just the seeds for what's coming after the ice melts.